Yeah, I don't know what that is.
Watch out, Stuart. I don't feel so well with this chainsaw in my neck. Nasty cough. I'll fix that for you. Take your mind off it completely from the shoulders up.
All right.
Alex, are you the Alex who was emailing me about light curve?
Ah, yeah, that would be it then.
That's you, yeah?
Yeah.
All right,
Sorry.
okay.
What's your name, Dan? Oh, right. So I didn't see your name. So, hi, Dan. Thanks for
How's
replying.
it going? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I read your email this morning and thought I might as well just wait for this meeting because it might be easier to discuss it here for a little bit.
Yep, definitely.
We can start there if you want.
Yeah. Well, have you been in on this, Stuart?
A little bit.
Yeah. Well, if we're going to get Alex to sort of start actually working on this, then we should have a little bit of agreement about how we go forward to save him working and then coming back later and other people saying, hang on a second, this is not how I wanted this to happen at all. So, which I know does happen. So, so Alex, have you told Stuart pretty much everything you've said to me?
I believe so. Yeah. I mean, obviously, a lot of it is from Stu's original documentation. So Stuart described the problem to me specifically, and then I sort of relayed onto you. And then obviously, yes, with respect to the specific issue with using the time object in tables, which I'm pretty sure I told you about, didn't I?
You did, but I hadn't heard about. Well, I hadn't tried to use a time object in tables like that before. So, what is this problem? It's like you can't do anything.
Yeah, basically. So if I'm correct, and I've asked on the dev forum, SunPy dev forum, in case I'm wrong or there's a workaround. But essentially, if you are using objects within a column, so in this case the time object within the column, it will turn it into a mixing column. And if that object is immutable, and the time object, as far as I'm aware, is immutable, so you can't change the value. Once you created a time object, it's a time object, and that's it. If you want to change the time, you would have to destroy that object and create a new one. And because of that, essentially, I mean, so the time object that stores the column is a time object, but with multiple values, but it is still immutable. And so essentially, if you want to do anything like rearrange, or if you want to change any time value, which obviously would be required for rearranging sorting the columns, so the rows, or equally if you want to do anything like add a row or delete a row, then you cannot do it directly. You can't just add a row by inserting into the object. You have to destroy the entire time object and essentially the table and start again, which is not very efficient, obviously. I mean, I'll admit I'm not.
That's pretty bad.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have to destroy the whole table though, right? Just that column. But yeah, it's still terrible.
Well, as far as I'm aware, it seems because you can't change that table because the column is kind of linked to the table. So if you wanted to add in a row, you would have to create a new table. As far as I'm aware, again, my understanding, I've used tables a little bit. My understanding is reasonably limited, especially I've never used them. I've never used a queue table and a mixing column before. But as far as I could tell, you do have to recreate the whole table because you've got a different number of rows in the new table potentially.
So that's a big deal for resampling. Essentially, can't be done.
This seems like it's wrong somehow. It's obviously not useful like that. It obviously needs fixing.
Yeah, well, maybe. I mean, that's where obviously it could be fixed potentially with the time object. I don't know. Maybe I'm just misinterpreting it, but it didn't let me do very much. As soon as you added in the time into a column, it really restricted you. With respect to things like resampling and similar, it does mean that, and I suppose the problem is it depends on how big your data set is, and therefore how much of an issue resampling would be. If you essentially double the amount of memory usage you need, so you've got the before and after, that might not actually be ridiculous still, but I don't know. Again, that's where it's the devil's in the details, and I'm not a good enough expert to be able to say, oh, definitely this will be a problem, we need to fix it, versus, well, we can actually work around it and be good enough for now.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like then if you want
No,
time,
the
you
other
have to
thing, of course, is
time in seconds or something like that as a float or a quantity, which is kind of throwing away a lot of the, the usefulness of time objects and Python's handling of those.
the other thing to remember, of course, is that nothing is ever truly immutable.
Is that so?
You can always go in and find the hidden attribute and change it.
That sounds like black magic, Stuart. Is that not going against the laws of nature?
Probably.
Again, I don't know. I'm not an expert enough to be able to figure out the workarounds. So I'm sure there are ways around it. But it's sort of, it is a problem that, if I'm correct, and it seems to be, I couldn't get it to work at all, then it is something we need to consider in the implementation.
I mean, really, as far as I can see, what we want for sort of for light curve essentially is just pandas that's unit aware. That's really the only, to me anyway, that's the big reason to not, or to try and think about changing from pandas, is we really would like to be unit aware. It's just so important and useful for science.
Well, yeah, the two major reasons were unit aware and not necessarily the time object itself, but having a higher accuracy in time than pandas can provide.
Pandas is down to nanoseconds, right? You can't go any further than nanoseconds.
I can't honestly say I know what pandas' limitations are. Stuart told me that it was the time is more accurate, but I don't know on that.
I can't remember what it is, but yeah, it I can't remember what pandas goes down to, but
it goes down to nanoseconds.
Way better. Yeah. Fair enough.
I've been using it recently. It goes down to nanoseconds.
Okay, so I guess that's not so much of a problem then.
But to me, it's the unit awareness, really. I mean, the switching from tables to pandas or whatever doesn't mean that light curve still doesn't need a refactor. So it's not the only thing, but it's something you'd rather be able to decide while you're doing the refactor anyway.
Yeah. Otherwise, you're just wasting a lot of time.
I don't know. The two things are quite separate in my mind.
Yeah.
The actual underlying data structure is relatively separate from the large-scale refactoring that needs to happen.
That's true.
It's also, I guess, support for things like coordinates and similar was potentially another reason for why pandas may not be quite so ideal. But I don't know what that's.
Say that again?
Support for coordinates, was that something that was also...
You can put AstroPy coordinate objects in AstroPy tables and stuff, but I don't know how important that will be. But I think that there is an awful lot to do on the AstroPy table front, and getting some of it done would be great. But it's more important to do the refactor of the actual SunPy code first, anyway. That doesn't mean to say that you can't move on into the AstroPy stuff, which is also very useful.
Well, it should be transparent. I agree with Stuart that the implementation details should be transparent to the user.
In what sense?
Whether we store, whether we use a pandas data frame or an AstroPy table, to some extent that should be hidden from the basic manipulations or the object out to the user.
Yeah, the interface and API can be ratified without necessarily knowing exactly which implementation is being used. But essentially all we're saying is, though, obviously developing the API in the sense of having an interface that we know is obviously a job, but then we've got to implement it, otherwise it's meaningless. And obviously the implementation will be critical on what you're implementing it on. And obviously, if we implemented it, for instance, on pandas at the moment, and then decided in a year's time, oh no, we're implementing it on AstroPy tables, then that's going to require an effort to
a lot of the refactoring is stuff that isn't actually directly linked to the data underneath. I don't think it's as much of a problem, like, because a lot of the refactoring is how you create the objects, and it doesn't actually matter what the data is in underneath. And at the moment, we don't actually expose a lot of API that does stuff to the data anyway.
Okay.
So, like, about the most exciting thing we do at the moment is like concatenate or something, and that's only recent. Like, the actual SunPy light curve API doesn't really expose much in the way of functionality that modifies the data to the user. Mostly, it's just the plotting and creation layer.
Okay.
I mean, I think as it's less exciting, but I think it is that those modifications Stu was talking about that we need to get done first, just because what we'd ideally like the data format to be in doesn't exist yet. So, like, Stuart, you were proposing an AstroPy time series class, right?
Has Stuart disappeared?
Okay, well, this you actually sent this link to me, Alex, but I have seen it before. How do I message on this thing?
There's an icon. If you move your mouse
I see
over,
it.
yeah.
I got it. So, I mean, as far as I can tell, this is kind of like ideally what we'd like. Essentially, it's the most useful functionality of pandas with unit support effectively. But that doesn't yet exist. So I think instead of trying to come up with a hack until something like it does exist, we should, we try and do the refactoring, the less
what we've got.
Yeah, and don't worry too much about the data format. It's going to make the like of more like map, for example, and all that work's got to be done. Like even things, I still think that that being able to use or concatenate multiple files into one light code, because at the moment, to me, that isn't true.
Hello.
Are you all right, Stuart?
Yeah, sorry. I just had to
sound like a
around
soundtrack of Tom and Jerry or something. But yeah, I was just saying while you're gone that ideally what we'd like the data to be in is something like your proposed AstroPy time series class. But since that doesn't exist, we should just focus on the API changes or the actual object creation changes or refactoring instead of coming up with a hack for the data.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can go with that. It saves obviously a lot of. The big problem is re-implementing the underlying data storage. Suddenly, it becomes difficult because, like you say, it's a bit of a hack, and there's a lot of unknowns as to how to implement.
I think we should just stick with pandas for the course of this exercise, and just do the refactoring that's somewhat independent of the data structure, and then a future project can be to either create and then implement some kind of AstroPy time series class, both the AstroPy side and the light curve side.
Yep, that's cool. I mean, I have also, just for the record, I've opened the question up on the AstroPy dev forums, so checking that I am right about that limitation with tables and time, and also therefore potentially pushing the time series issue to the forefront of some people's minds at least. So fingers crossed that might come back with something. But
All right, good. So it's actually been a while since I looked at it in detail, but is Stuart still with us? Stuart?
Sorry, I didn't hear that. Say that again.
I was just saying. I was just asking if you're still with us. But do you remember the details of the light curve refactor that aren't linked to the data structure? Like we've got to make it more like map, right? It's just been a while since I actually looked at the details of that.
Rip out the data downloading code, write a light curve factory, clean out the code.
I've got the link to the actual online project proposal part somewhere.
Oh, you mean it's this one, right? Hang on. Is that one?
That looks like it. Yep, that's it. Google Summer Code. Yep. So yeah, from the looks of it, it looks like a reasonably simple task then. The difficult bit was going to be in re-implementing any fundamental data storage, but I've played around with pandas quite a lot, so I know how they work. I should be able to. I've played around with a lot of maps now. God, too many maps.
Yeah, well, no, I mean, I think that would be. Well, I wouldn't say it's easy, but or simple, but it's certainly a lot simpler. And if we can get that part of it done, then like I'll be in a much better shape for us to actually, in the future, have a better data structure underneath it, which I think we need to do. But it's kind of like you got to break it down into sequential steps. Otherwise, it just like I'm just not sure that all that could be done in one sort of simple project. You know.
Yep, I agree. That makes sense. Of course, the scary thing is actually I'm not the only applicant now for the light curve refactor. So it was funny. It was less than 24 hours after I put my thing online, obviously very early draft, and then somebody else put it online on the same. Okay, then that was strange timing. So we'll see. I'll compete. I'm fine.
Yeah. Okay. Good. Competition breeds excellence, right? Isn't that the phrase?
It. Yeah, I think so.
Is that right?
So they say.
So, is there anything else worth considering for the project? I think that pretty much covers all of the questions that I have for now. Can't think of anything else necessary.
I think there's actually a lot to get on with what we discussed already. So.
Yep, that's cool. Okay, great.
Okay, so whatever other issues people wanted to talk about today, then I guess we can get to them.
So I found a bug last week with drawing grids on SunPy maps. You get an error, an AstroPy error eventually, and we never used to have that. And I wonder why this was not caught in our tests. So I don't think we don't have any tests for maps where we draw a grid. Is that correct? It must be correct.
Don't know.
We mustn't.
Yeah. Otherwise, this bug would have popped up. I would have thought so.
I can never remember. Where is the draw grid attribute? Is it in map factory?
So map base.
map base.
No, so there's no draw grid on there.
Yeah.
So
No, I can't find one either.
on test map base. So let me make a comment. That's all I have. You were going to say something, Stuart.
I pushed the 0.6.4 release to SunPy.
Cool.
Next bug fix release. Guess I'm gonna.
I have a very simple fix for map.peak. Again, for grid spacing in map.peak. It wasn't actually... In map.peak, you could set... Draw grid would only accept values which were just ints or floats, and it would get through .peak, but then when you pass that on to whatever function the peak function calls, then that would look for SunPy quantities. So there was no way to change the grid spacing in map.peak. So my PR 1760 fixes that.
So it does.
Yes, it does.
That looks good to me. Surely that's one that can just be merged straight away.
Probably backport that.
Okay, I will put that on the to-do list. Anything else?
I don't think so. I don't have anything else in particular.
Yeah, nor do I. I was the Lyco thing was really what I was interested in.
The only thing that really needs doing before 0.7 is some more examples for the gallery and the docs.
I've got a couple that I've mostly done here, which I can add to it, but I wanted you to help me at some point add them, Stu, to make sure that I don't make a silly mistake. Still a little
Okay,
bit
cool.
apprehensive about adding stuff, but it's not a hurry. So just when you're feeling better, not like death.
Right, I'll make a PR for the draw grid backports.
Cool.
Yes, that's it.
Cool. Well, thank you very much.
Thanks, guys.
Cool. Nice talking to you all.
Nice chatting to you. Speak to you soon.
Get better. Bye.
Ciao. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Get better soon, mate.
Cheers. Ta-ra.